Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. And in this video, what I want to talk about is just do another. In the previous video, I talked about um, different ways you can communicate data to the front end when you're using templating, in this case, EJS templating, and then also showed an example like fetch. So what I want to do is just kind of give a more robust example. Basically, the idea will be like where you can make like a thing that you click for each thing, and you can then display the data of the thing you clicked. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of show sort of like how this would logically work out. I'm going to use everyone's favorite set of sample data, Pokemon. Okay, so I'm going to go get the Pokemon data, dummy data.netlify.app. I'll go over here to Pokedex, and I'm just going to download this file. So save link as. Yeah, we'll just save it there for now. Okay, let's open that folder. Okay, and I'm going to want to copy that data over to development. Let's open this in a new tab. Okay, and it's the development, so I gotta first take the file. Where's Pokemon.json? Here it is. I'm gonna cut this file, bring it over here to development, where we have educational, teaching videos, and I think this is inside of EJS, which will be over here, EJS2. I think this is where we're at, yeah. And then I'm going to put this in a folder called models. And I'm going to paste that there. Okay. So now when I go to VS Code, see there's my folder called models, and there's my Pokemon data, which is essentially an array of an object with a property called Pokemon, which has an array, which is really what I want. So cool. So let's head over to my server.js. I'm going to go import the Pokemon data. Okay, so const Pokedata. Actually, we'll just say const Pokemon equals require dot slash models slash Pokedex.json. And I only really want the Pokemon properties, because again, if we take a look at the file a second ago, it's really an object with a property called Pokemon, and that's the actual array. So I really want the property called Pokemon, so I'm just going to do that. So that way, this is just going to equal the array. Okay, that'll work for me. Okay, nice. So first we're going to do it where we're going to do it all through EJS. Okay, so I'm going to first create a route for this page, app.get slash, we're going to call it display Pokemon EJS rec res, and we're going to do a res.render, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, I want to render poke1.ejs. That's what we're going to render, and I want to pass the Pokemon data, which we'll just pass in as Pokemon. Okay, and then that's it. That's going to render the page, and then I'll do everything else in this case from the EJS file. So this is how you would do it if you just want to not bother with other endpoints and whatnot. So I'm going to go to my views folder, create a new file called poke1.ejs. Okay. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that this is like working. I have the right data, and that's all good. So I'm going to first take a look at my data to take a look at what each object looks like. So each object in the array has these properties: ID, name. So we're going to start off with ID and name. ID and name. Okay. So what I'm going to do is we're going to create a loop. Percentage Pokemon dot for each. Okay, and for each we're going to have the individual Pokemon, and we'll also take the index. And then we got to make sure we put all our little EJS pieces there. Okay, and all I want to start off with right now is I'm just going to do h1 with a Poke.name. Why? Because again, Poke is going to represent the individual Pokemon because I'm doing a loop over the array, and then this is a callback, and this callback takes two arguments, which is the individual Pokemon and the index of that individual Pokemon. So right now for each Pokemon, I'm creating an H1. Let's just see if that works. Notamon server.js, right? Yep. Notamon server.js. Again, this is not an intro to Express video. I do have intro to Express videos I would recommend if that's what you're trying to do. But this is going to be more like an advanced Express video. So I'm going to assume that you kind of know some of the things that are going on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to head over to localhost 3000 / display Pokemon EJS. And yeah, that works. See, I see the name of all the different Pokemon. So that means my route is getting that array just fine. Okay, perfect. Now the next thing I want to do is make sure that my front end is going to get the full array so I can work with it from there. Okay. So I want to type in script, put in a script tag in here. Okay, and what I want to do is first say const Pokemon. We'll call this raw Pokemon equals, and then what we're going to do is here in the EJS, we're going to put quotation marks, and in that string, we want to put the JSON string. So it would be JSON.stringify Pokemon, because I can't send the array down because the server can't talk to the front end. So what I need to do is take the array and turn it into a string. I can pass a string in because I can put the string in the HTML file. So that'll put the string of the array. I'm then going to need to take that string and fix it up. Okay, so we're going to say const JSON Pokemon, although it doesn't look like... Oh, I forgot to do this. Percentage equals, there we go. And what else does it not like? Okay, no, now it's good. Okay, JSON Pokemon, and going back to our previous example from the previous video, let me see if I still have that. What I need to do is I need to do this. So, because basically what's going to happen is that for all the quotation marks, it's going to show the encoded version, and I need to replace that with an actual quotation mark. So anytime this ends up popping in that raw string, I need to replace it with that. So I'm just going to literally just copy this over here. So that's going to really be Pokemon raw Pokemon dot replace all. Okay, and that's going to return sort of the string that is parsable because all those quotation marks have been fixed. Okay, in my previous video to this, where I talked about like sending data from the server to the client with EJS, I kind of go over this in more detail. And now I actually have a JSON string, so I can be like const Pokemon. And again, even though I already have a variable called Pokemon, these variables exist at two different times. This exists on the server when EJS is parsing this file to create an HTML file. This const Pokemon won't get read until the HTML file actually gets to the browser and the browser runs the code. So they won't conflict with each other. So I say const Pokemon equals JSON dot parse, and then we want to parse the JSON Pokemon string, and then just to make sure that worked, I want to console.log Pokemon. Okay, make sure that my front end got it. So now I'm going to open up my DevTools, and I'm going to refresh the page, and yeah, that looks like I got all the Pokemon. Okay, nice. And again, just so you can see what happened, when I take a look at the actual file I sent over, okay, see there's an H1 for all that stuff, and then when I get to the script tag at the bottom, see this giant string is what I sent over. It's like the entire Pokemon array as one big string that then gets sent over, and then we parsed it and turned it into a JavaScript object. Okay, so you can see sort of like what's going on there. So that's all well and good. Okay, so now what we want to do is create like what I'm going to do is I'm going to create like a div here. Okay, and the idea is that I want to make it where, well, let's do this. Let's put the div on the top. Okay, the reason being is that then you have to scroll all the way to the bottom So let's put the list on the bottom and the div on top. And what I want is that whenever you click on a Pokemon, you're going to see that Pokemon in that div. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to define a function called, and see, notice I'm putting this in the script tag because this script tag is front-end code. That's code that's going to be read in the browser. So later on, when I do like on click equals something, okay, that has to be something um, that's defined in the browser, okay, or a function defined in the script tag, because this gets clicked when the code's running in the browser. So it's all about context. Okay, a lot about just understanding what your code is doing. It's just understanding in what context are certain lines and code being sort of read. Okay, and then again after this, I'll show you how to do it with JSON, with just normal JavaScript HTTP calls, which is going to be a lot easier to pull off. Okay, okay, so let's write a function called render Pokemon. Okay, and the render Pokemon will take the index of the Pokemon you want to render. Okay, and basically once it takes that, what it's going to do, it's going to go get the div. So const div equals, and I'm going to just use plain JavaScript DOM manipulation for this. You could use jQuery. Again, if you want to use jQuery, you just have to add a jQuery script tag at the top. But it'd be like document.query selector. And I want to grab the div. Okay. And that'll give me the div. And then I want to like clear out the div. So I'm going to say div.inner text. Actually, inner HTML equals nothing. So that way the div is empty. So that way I can recreate what's inside the div. Okay. Then I'm going to say like const Pokemon. We'll just say const p, which equals the individual Pokemon we're using, is going to equal Pokemon based on the index that we got received. So it's going to be that individual Pokemon that's at that index. And to make my life easy, I'm going to just use string interpolation. So I'm going to say div.inner HTML again equals, and I'm going to use backticks so I can use string interpolation. So we're going to say here, we're going to do like an h1 that has the Pokemon's name, p.name, which is like, you know, actually we should probably put the ID first. p.id. Okay, and then we want the image. Source equals, I have to go look up what the property is. So let me go back to the JSON file and just see what so it's img is the property. Okay, so it would be p.image. And then generally you want to put an alt tag. So we'll do that as well. p.name. Okay, cool. So essentially what's going to happen is that anytime this function is run, it's going to put that inside that div. So now I just need to make it where anytime you click on any of these h1s, it's going to call that function with the right index. So then I go here and I just type in render Pokemon. And then in here I can interpolate the index using EJS, because I can pre-populate that, because that just needs to be statically in those h1s. So percentage equals the index. Okay, render Pokemon. That should work. Okay, so let's try that out. Console, just make sure there's no error. Good. So now if I click on Bulbasaur, yeah, see, Bulbasaur appears. Now if I click on Charmeleon, now it's Charmeleon, because again, I'm doing that. I'm taking that extra step of erasing what's already there. That's what this line is doing. I'm saying, hey, the inner HTML of that div is now cleared, and then I'm replacing it with something else. And this function is always going to replace it with whatever Pokemon I specify. So that's essentially how I could do it without having to use any kind of like fetch request or whatnot. All done, you know, you taking advantage of the way I can use EJS. Okay, so I can create that kind of experience, and then I can style it more and make it more fancy. Okay, so now let me show you how to do it if you wanted to use like AJAX calls. So this could be done with fetch request, which is built into the browser. You could do it with the jQuery AJAX function. You could do it with the Axios function. If you want to use the Axios library, whatever you prefer, just some sort of HTTP client on the client side, meaning being able to make API calls from the front end. So first, let's just get started and kind of go through this whole step again. So I am going to make another route. This time it's going to be display Pokemon HTTP, and we'll call it Poke2. Okay, and then I'll create Poke2, so I'll just copy the original, paste. Okay, and I'm gonna rename it Poke2. Okay, essentially I'm gonna still do the same thing where I'm rendering the index, so that's gonna be, that can stay as is, except I'm not gonna need to do all this, okay? Instead, I'm just gonna have this function, and instead of us having the whole array of Pokemon available to us in the front end, we're just gonna make an API call for the individual Pokemon we need. So what we need is a route that gives us one Pokemon at a time. So we need a show route, but that sends the data back as JSON. Okay, so I'm gonna head back to my server.js, and I'm gonna create another route. We'll call it app.get slash get Pokemon slash ID. Actually, we'll put slash index. Okay, rec res. Okay, and then all this is going to do is going to be res.json, and it's going to send Pokemon back, but only the Pokemon that has the rec.params.index at that particular index. So that's all that's going to do. Okay. So first, let me go back to the Poke2. So this render Pokemon function is going to be a little bit different. Okay, that end part's going to be kind of the same. I'm going to comment this out for a moment. Okay. Because it thinks it's HTML, so let's just do this. Okay, that's fine for now. Okay, so basically what's going to happen is at the beginning of the function, what I need to do is go make a fetch request for that Pokemon. So it's going to be like fetch. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to fetch http://www.localhost, not www. localhost 3000 / get Pokemon. And then we're going to want to inject the index. So it would be index because we're receiving the index every time this function is called. Okay, now that's going to return a promise. So then we're going to do a dot then. But the way fetch works, it doesn't return, that first promise doesn't return you the data. It returns a response object. So in that case, I have to do this, where they take the response object and then I just return response.json. That's what actually converts the response into a JavaScript object. So then the next dot then actually has the individual Pokemon. So we'll call it P. Okay. So let's just console.log P to make sure that we are actually getting the right Pokemon. So right now, when I click on each Pokemon in this version, it should just be making an API call to that route I just created that sends back one Pokemon. So it's going to end up sending a request to this route, who's going to send back the JSON data for that one Pokemon. So now I'm going to refresh this and go to, well, I'll go to a different URL, HTTP. Okay, now look here in the console. I click on Ivysaur, and see I get the data for Ivysaur. I click on Charizard, I get the data for Charizard. So it works. Wonderful. So I know that I'm getting the data. Okay, so then basically now I just take this logic, and I'm just going to put that in here. That's the same. I need to clear out the div. I don't need this line anymore because I already have a variable called P that has the Pokemon. So really I just need this now. Okay. And it's just essentially doing the same thing. It's just taking that, clearing out the div, and then just replacing the HTML that's inside that div with the HTML that represents the Pokemon. Okay, the only difference here is I'm not, instead of me stringifying the data into the HTML file, what I'm doing is I'm just saying, hey, let me just get the data I need from a JSON endpoint from my server. So now, if I refresh the page, and I click on Blastoise, Blastoise is going to render at the top. I click on Venusaur, Venusaur is going to render at the top. Okay, essentially that's all it really takes. Okay, either approach is fine. Okay, I would say probably more typically people do the HTTP route where they do the HTTP requests, because if you are creating the server, then you have the ability to add extra endpoints, so why not? But if if you're ever in a situation where templating is really your only option, which maybe with certain frameworks where maybe making additional endpoints might be not as simple as it is in Express, or some other situations, there is a way. Like you can always stringify the object from the server into the HTML file, and then from the client side code, take that stringified code, turn it back into a JavaScript object, as we saw in Poco 1. Okay, and again in the video description you'll find the link to the repo where I have all these videos, all this code, and you'll find that this is in the code in the folder called EJS2. So I'll see you all later. Hopefully you found this useful. My name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Have a great day and enjoy.